I just would like to speak to the elephant in the room. There is an immense amount of pot smell right now. That's not really my brand. Someone's having a great time on the other side of this wall.
You guys ready for Mr. Adam Bush? Give it up for Adam Bush!
Woo! Growing up, my parents were traveling children's ministers, which sounds creepy. Because it is creepy. My mom said we were on the road so much that one time when I was 5, I yelled, "Dad, you passed our house." It was a Holiday Inn. My dad was a puppeteer, which is not something you typically tell people. My job, though, was to help with the puppet skits. So he'd have 2 up, and I'd be just behind the puppet stage, and I'd have the next one ready, so when he'd throw one off, I'd put the next one on. And like one time, I put it on wrong. Like I put it on backwards. My dad wasn't a jerk about it, but afterwards he was just like, "Adam, what are you thinking?" I was like, "I don't know, man. I'm 5. Maybe hire someone who's not in kindergarten." Growing up, my folks were always really optimistic. Like, incredibly encouraging. My dad, he would just say like, "Adam, if you work hard and you don't stop, you can do anything." I'd be like, "Dad, I want to be a musician." He'd be like, "You can do it." I'd be like, "Dad, I want to be a preacher." He was like, "You can do it." I was like, "Dad, I want to be a professional baseball player." And he was like, "Well, maybe not anything." I said, "Dad, I want to be a writer and a performer." He was like, "Yeah, you could actually do that." One day I was getting ready for school and Dad said, "Hey, how about today, instead of school, we go see a movie?" And I wasn't really picking up on what he was like trying to do. And so I was like, "Well, I gotta go to school." He goes, "How about today we go to a movie?" And I was like, "I gotta go to school." But we did see a movie. We saw Fievel Goes West. And it was like, you know it. It was just like my dad's way of hanging out with me, but also like encouraging me in my gifts, you know, that sort of thing. And you better believe the next day at school, I told everybody about it. I stood up in the middle of the class. I was like, "Can I have everyone's attention, please? Yesterday I was not here. You would have assumed I was sick. But nothing could be further from the truth. I was at the movies with my father. I saw Fievel Goes West. If anyone's interested in the plot, I know it." When I was 9, I came up with an original idea for a television show, and I wrote a letter. "Dear ABC Television, here's my idea. It's about 1 or 2 people. They're journalists or detectives. And every episode, something happens. So give me a call." 2 weeks later, I get my letter back and it's stamped unsolicited and unread. But I was so convinced ABC liked my pitch that every time I saw a cop show on TV, I was like, "That was my idea!" I'm not saying I'm responsible for the whole CSI franchise, but the similarities are uncanny. To really understand what it was like for me growing up, it's important that you know I am originally from Louisiana. That's an appropriate response. One time this girl in the audience, she goes, "Woo!" And I was like, "Oh, are you from Louisiana?" And she goes, "Nah, Missouri." I was like, "That's a different state." She goes, "I've just always been jealous of people who are from Louisiana." How crappy is Missouri? Most people are like, you're from Louisiana? Do you also make duck calls for a living? Which is appropriate. My first job in high school, our boss would pick us up and it would take an hour to get to the job site. He would blow duck calls the entire way there and make us guess what kind of duck it was. As if that wasn't bad enough, he only knew 2 kinds of ducks. We moved to Louisiana because my dad became the pastor of a church of 11 people. Not the thriving congregation one would expect. Within a year, 10 of the people left. I'm no mathematician, but that seems like about a 90% failure rate. The lone lady who was left was a sweet old lady named Miss Utopia. Miss Utopia was the kindest, sweetest, most generous old lady I'd ever met. When I was a kid, I used to go to church and I would dress up like a cowboy. Miss Utopia would say, "Hey, Adam." I'd be like, "There's no Adam here. I'm Cowboy Clem." I was convinced that I had her fooled because that Christmas, she bought me 2 presents, one for Adam and one for Clem. And I was like, "You stupid idiot. I got you totally fooled." By the time I got to high school, I realized like how country Louisiana was. Like, there were a lot of guys who drove tractors to school. I don't know if you could tell, I'm not putting off strong John Deere vibes. Guys in Louisiana would take one look at my hair and be like, "Are you one of them lesbians?" I grew up so conservative, I was just like, maybe. I do like girls. To really help you understand how country Louisiana is, one day I get to PE and the coach says, "This semester, we're gonna teach y'all how to square dance." And then he looked at me and he goes, "Now some of y'all are gonna try to get out of it." And I was like, "Yep." He goes, "But you can only be excused for religious purposes." And I was like, "Challenge accepted." So I go home and tell my dad, I'm like, "I need you to write me a note that says Adam doesn't square dance." And he did it. Actually, he wrote a note that said Adam cannot square dance, which was a little fatherly jab at my lack of athleticism. Well, I care. My dad was a preacher. So when I turned in that note, it wasn't from my father. It was from Father Bush. So I say to the coach, "What do you want me to do instead of square dancing?" And he looked at me very confidently and said, "Write a report on how square dancing originated in Louisiana." It didn't. Louisiana wonders why they're ranked 53rd in education. If you didn't get that joke, there are only 50 states. That's what. Just want to be clear about that. So while everybody out there is boot scooting it to school and I'm busy trying to write the next great television drama, I was feeling real isolated, right? Just old Clem by himself. Eventually I met these guys who were more my speed. Like, they listened to music that wasn't Alan Jackson and wore t-shirts that didn't say "These colors don't run." And like, we were super tight all through high school and we had nicknames for each other. Like, I have, if you see, I have abnormally large fingers. Like, look at your fingers right now. The width of the base is one width, and they get progressively smaller as they go up. Also, this scene of you guys looking at your hands is amazing. Your normal fingers are one width at the bottom and progressively get smaller. But for me, God was like, let's just give Adam 10 hot dogs to grab stuff with. So you take that and you add the gap in my teeth I had at the time. My friends affectionately nicknamed me Gappy McBighands. One night we're all staying the night together and I was like, "I need a pillow." And they were like, "Just rest your head on your massive pillowy fingers." You know, stuff friends say. Last summer, my buddy Rob, who was part of the group, his father passed away. And I was out of town, and so I caught a red eye back to Louisiana, and I pulled up to the funeral like just as it was starting. And as I'm walking up, I see that all 6 of the original gang are there. I didn't realize that was gonna happen. It's the first time we had been together in the same place in like 20 years. And so I step up to the funeral, and Rob is leading everyone in Amazing Grace. And it's such a wonderful moment that I take my phone out to video it. My buddy Wade is standing right here, and before he says hi or gives me a hug or acknowledges my presence, he just leans over and whispers, "Must be pretty hard using that phone with those gigantic fingers." Gappy wasn't the first nickname I ever got. I'm very short, so people, instead of calling me Adam Bush, would call me Adam Shrub. I had a teacher in elementary school refer to me in front of the whole class as Little Dumpling one time. That one stuck for a while. I especially hated it whenever people would shorten it and just be like, "What up, dump?" But the name that stuck with me the longest came from this dude named Randy. Randy didn't hang out all the time with us, but when he did, we thought he was so cool. Like, Randy was older than us. He had dropped out of high school. He worked at the Great American Cookie Factory. He was a real go-getter. Randy didn't care for me too much. One day, we're all going to hang out at the Golden Corral. Some fans. I guess Randy didn't know I was coming, and so I walk in, and I see him look at me, and he just goes, "Who brought the kid?" Like, honestly, I didn't really notice it at first, but just like kept saying it. Eventually to the point where like my friends were kind of saying it around me. Like my best friend Rob, he got frustrated with me one time. He's like, "Who brought the kid?" I was like, "We are the same age." He goes, "That is such a thing the kid would say." It was a really defining season in my life, and not in a good way. Like previous to this, I had, gotten accolades for my personality. Some people bought me 2 presents. Thank you. But I changed. I did. I got quieter, less confident. I wasn't writing any letters to ABC. And I would lie about like my taste and like the things that I liked. Like one day I was giving Randy a ride home, and I had a mixtape that I was playing that I had made. And when my favorite song came on, Randy goes, "This song sucks." And without hesitation, I go, "It does." He was like, "Isn't this your tape?" I was like, "Probably my mom's." He's like, "Your mom likes Green Day?" I was like, "Sucks to be her." I think she also likes the Counting Crows, so we should get this out of here. "You get out of here, Long December." Or whatever song they sing. I should be clear, like I didn't feel the insecurity like all the time. Just when I was like with my friends at, their house or school or church or work. Those times. And it's not like we didn't have fun. We had a lot of fun together, but like you hang out so much, like hanging out turns into ragging on each other, which turns into sarcasm. And then after a while, it's just, discouragement. Yeah. Especially when I was around Randy. When I was around Randy, my confidence tank, it would just like bottom out. But when I was with my dad, like, boop, 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 and fill back up. Like when I told my dad that I want to be a preacher, which I was, though you probably could guess by everything about me. My dad said, "Hey, make a tape of you preaching, duplicate it, send it to churches all over the country. You're so good, they'll have you come and preach." I was like, "Dad, no one listens to tapes anymore." He was like, "But they'd start again for you." My dad encouraged me to take a speech class in high school, which at first I didn't like because it was it was like assignments like, write a report on how education is the building blocks for a successful future. And I was like, well, my science teacher is also the basketball coach, so I hope not. But one day, my teacher said, write a speech that's funny. And my head exploded. I did a speech called How Not to Ask a Girl on a Date, which was perfect because I had never asked a girl out on a date. It killed. I went home and I told my dad, and he just kind of smiled at me. He didn't really say anything. I was like, Dad, didn't you hear? It went great. He goes, I heard you. I'm just not surprised anymore. Quick sidebar about that speech class. When I moved to Oklahoma, I missed that class and the students in it so much that I wrote a letter back to the speech class. And I asked my teacher to read it in front of them. I said, I've written something funny for each kid in the class in order of the way they sat, because big nerd. A couple weeks later, I go back to Louisiana, and my friends were like, we read your letter. It was hilarious. You mentioned everyone. Almost. Bria was a girl who sat in the middle of the class, and she didn't talk very much. And I had forgotten just her. So if she didn't have an insecurity then, she's got one now. When I was 17, my folks said, we're moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city known for not a dang thing.
Tulsa race riots.
Thank you, that person. We moved here because my dad said he got a job at a Bible school. The problem was he hadn't. I said, Dad, I thought you got a job at that place. And he goes, well, not yet. I said, do they know you're interested? And he goes, they will when I tell them. And I said, are they hiring? And he goes, I don't know, probably. What's crazy is the next Monday, they found out we had moved there, called him, interviewed him, hired him on the spot. I was like, I think my dad is a wizard. Sidebar, that is not an inspirational story you should follow. That doesn't work out for people, so don't do it. He was so excited. But honestly, I was pretty heartbroken. I really miss Louisiana. Most of you are probably like, why? It's not that I really fit in, it's all I knew, right? And my girlfriend was back in Louisiana, who I knew I was gonna get married to. Sidebar, we broke up a week later because apparently I was the only one who thought she was my girlfriend. It's probably the most embarrassing story I'll tell all night. So I told my dad, I said, I'm moving back to Louisiana, just me. Actually, I didn't tell him. I wrote it in a note and left it in the bathroom like an angsty teen CW drama. Dad, guess what lesbian's moving back to Louisiana? Guess what? Signed A. That is a reference to the show Pretty Little Liars, and I am ashamed that I made that joke. Also, if you got that reference, you have crappy taste in television. My dad said, how about this? You don't move, I'll get you a brand new car. And I said yes. But I immediately regretted it because the next month he handed me a bill for $350. I was like, what's this? He's like, it's your car payment plus a little interest. You're probably like, I don't think your dad's a wizard. He's just really good at making money. I asked my dad not long after that, I said, why did you work so hard to get me to stay? And it was like the first kind of man-to-man talk we had, I think. He said, Adam, when we were back in Louisiana, I just started to watch my favorite parts of you fade away. It just wasn't right for you. In fact, the whole reason we moved here was for you. We've had some pretty big adventures here in Oklahoma. Like, in 2004, my mom, she got invited to speak at this church in England. She invited me to go along, and I was really excited. I'd never flown internationally before. And so, packed my stuff. We get to the airport, I put my backpack up on the conveyor belt, and it gets flagged. TSA agent, he reaches inside the front pocket, and he pulls out a knife. Immediately, my mind flashes back to about a year earlier when a friend of mine gave me that knife as a gift. I'm not really a knife kind of guy, so I threw it in my bag. I threw my bag in the back of the closet, forgot about it. Just so happens, I grabbed that bag for the trip and forgot to check the front pocket. So there we are, me, the agent, with said knife. But it's not just any kind of knife. It's a switchblade. Here's a fun fact. It is illegal to carry a switchblade in the state of Oklahoma. Here's another fun fact. It's a federal offense to carry one into a federal building, like an airport. So the agent takes me down to this room in the basement of the airport, closes the door, and leaves me there. And I'm there by myself for 4 hours until the door opens up. And in walks a Tulsa police officer. And he says, "Mr. Bush, you're under arrest." So I put my hands out for the cuffs like this, and he goes, "You got to turn around." I feel like we're getting to know each other here tonight. I feel like this is a safe space. I think it's okay to tell you that in that moment, I cried like a little girl. I mean, it was ugly crying. He's escorting me through the airport, and I'm just bawling like a baby. And the cop, he was so nice. He was like, "Where were you going?" I was like, "I was going to London." So he brings me downtown. We walk into the jail. Immediately, I'm a fish out of water. Just this row of inmates who look like they want to beat the crap out of me. They take my shoelaces, my belt, everything out of my pockets, my dignity. They put cuffs around my ankles like I'm gonna be able to make a run for it. And then they asked me, "Do you want a pillow and a blanket?" It's so late on a Friday night, the chances of them getting a judge to set my bail, very slim. At that point, I was just like, okay, time out. This is ridiculous. This was an accident, all right? This is not me. I don't do this. I don't go to jail. I go to church. At one point, this cop comes up to me with a brown paper sack, and it's got 3 bologna sandwiches in it. I wasn't about to eat it. And so I just looked around for a guy who looked like this wasn't his first time. I gave it to him. I was just like, if I'm gonna be here a while, I could probably use a friend. I'm gonna be running this block. First step, bologna sandwiches. Last step, Bush Boss. That's gonna be my next TV show. You thought it was just, sorry. You thought it was just bologna sandwiches. Here's something I knew. To get bailed out, you have to have a judge set your bail. I told you that. What I didn't know was you can't pay your own bail. You have to get somebody on the outside to pay it for you. And I could make a phone call, but I didn't have my cell phone on me, so I didn't know anybody's phone number. I could remember the Domino's pizza line, but I didn't feel like that'd be very helpful. So as the night continues, they're calling people's names and they're going that way. But about midnight, they call my name, but they tell me to go this way. And I walk through a door, and there's a lady on the other side of this cage, and she hands me my stuff, and the door behind me buzzes open, and there's my dad. And he's not mad, he's not yelling. He just stands up, and he gives me a hug. And then he says what I feel like every good father should say to his kid when he busts him out of the clink. He looked at me and goes, "You want to go to Wendy's?" A couple years later, I was at my house and my dad called. I didn't pick it up, and so he left me a voicemail, and I have it. I'm going to play it for you, but it's a little hard to understand, so I'm going to tell you what he's asking me. He's asking me if my roommate works at the church I work at, which is called Church on the Move. He's asking me what his name is. Here's the voicemail.
Hey, buddy. Dad, well, 9:30. Your roommate, does he work up at Church on the Move? I'm trying to figure out which one he was. What's his name? Give me a call sometime or text me. Tell me his name. He works at Church on the Move. All right. Bye.
That was the last time my dad ever called. A couple days later, Dad had a heart attack and he passed away. When Dad died, my first thought was, why did I pick up the phone? What was I doing that was so important not to pick it up? That was my feeling at first. But as time has moved on, I've actually come to really appreciate the fact that I didn't pick up. Because that is the daddest voicemail I have ever heard. Does your roommate work at your work? Also, I've never met him, so what's his name? He starts the whole thing by saying, it's Dad. Like, oh, who is this voice? That voicemail is just such a wonderful reminder I have of like what kind of guy he was, you know? Like he would use any stupid excuse to call me. My dad was 51 when he died. It was unexpected. People would ask, how did he pass away? And my brother would just look him in the eye and very solemnly go, well, he exploded. My brother's humor is very dark. I miss my dad a ton. It's been 13 years. Like to the point that I've romanticized the dead. Like my mom, who's sitting right there, she was just as big a part of, thank you for her. My mom was just as big a part of my life, as my dad was. But, I wrote this special about my dad. So, Mom, if you want your own special. People don't always love it when you make jokes about your parents passing. You guys like it. People don't always love it unless their parent has passed. Not long after Dad died, I was at work and I was with my friend Andy, and his dad had died the year earlier. And we're in this meeting and I'm pitching an idea and it's not going very well for me. And Andy, in front of everyone, just goes, man, Adam, that idea is so bad. If I was your dad, I would have died early too. There was silence. Except for me. I just started laughing so hard. Because I just felt like I wasn't alone. Like I felt like Andy understood my pain. His pain was my pain. My pain was his pain. Humor was our medicine, which sounds like an amazing Pinterest quote. Not long after that, I was working at the airport. And I said to my boss, I said, hey, you're hiring for a supervisor. I'm going to apply. And my boss looked at me and said, but Adam, you're not a leader. Then a little later, I was talking to another boss and I said, ultimately, I want to be a professional writer. And they said, yeah, I mean, you could write, but you're always going to need an editor. Some of you are like, you need better bosses. Also, most professional writers need an editor, so it's hardly a burn. But it still hurt. I did start writing, though. Wrote a television show. It's about a couple of detectives where every episode something happens. It's a kid's show. It's called Pete and Penelope. It's a puppet television show. You're not surprised. People would say, so you're really into puppets, huh? And I'd be like, well, don't say it like that. I just like puppets professionally. That's not better. You can't talk about puppets without it sounding weird. One time my wife and I we invited a couple over for dinner, and then just randomly I was like, you guys want to see my puppets? Afterwards, Diana was like, dang it, Adam, don't start with puppets. But I had a friend come up to me and he was like, what is this thing that you're doing? And I said, I'm making a television show for kids. And he said, yeah, you're not going to be the one to make a show. I was like, dang it, are you guys starting a club against me? What's happening here? And you might be like, Adam, what does it matter what people are saying, right? I mean, that one guy who worked at the airport is too stupid to know he probably couldn't legally hire you to work there. And I get it. Like, people's opinions, they don't define you. But they feel like they do. While I was working on Pete and Penelope, I got invited to visit a filming of Sesame Street, which I was like, take me now, Lord, I've done it all. I mean, for puppet people, Sesame is our Everest. I was watching them film this scene with Abby Cadabby, the character. And after that scene, the puppeteer who puppeteers Abby Cadabby, she walked up to me. I know who she is. I follow her on Instagram, and I don't do very well meeting people I admire. So she comes up to me and she goes, hi, I'm Leslie. A normal person would have responded with their name. But I just looked at her and go, I know. She just walked away. I haven't been invited back, and I'm not saying that's why, but I don't think it helped. As we're leaving, I just take a look at where I am. It's like how iconic the show is and the characters, and I'm thinking to myself, no one really in my world would appreciate this just the way that I do. Except my dad. Honestly, my dad would have picked up a puppet and been like, this is how you put a puppet on, not backwards. I'd be like, it's 35 years, Bill, let it go. But just as I'm leaving, I'm reminded of Sesame's one rule. Biggest thing, don't take a photo of a dead puppet. That's what they tell you. A dead puppet is a puppet that's not being performed. I'm walking out and I see Snuffleupagus. He dead. I'm not going to say what I did next, but let's just say if you're looking for a black market photo of a dead Snuffy, I might know who has one. I threw everything I could into Pete and Penelope. And pitching it to networks was a real Hollywood experience. Like, we wrote a song to end every episode. We say goodbye. We call it the goodbye song. And I sent it to his producer one time, and he calls me up and he goes, love it, love it, love it. Don't change a thing. I was like, great, couple of changes. Does it have to be called the goodbye song? And I was like, well, we are saying goodbye. Are we though? It just feels so negative. And I was like, well, we all have to say goodbye at some point. And he goes, do we? I prefer to say, see you later. And I was like, me too, click. But we did sell it. And making the first season was like the most labor-intensive thing in my life. Like, it was just like, making season 1 was 16-hour days. We were exhausted. There were dead puppets everywhere. But I was doing it. Pete and Penelope premiered spring of 2020. And as far as world events go, that was the big thing happening that year. I was so excited because I really just felt like this was going to validate all of my optimism, all my excitement about my personal creativity, and just like wipe the slate clean of all my insecurities. Episode 1 premiered, and the title came up, and underneath it said, created by Adam Bush. And I felt no different. A couple of years ago, I went to a therapist for the first time. Just a quick midlife check-in. Told him my whole life story, the 50-minute version. Well, ABC television never wrote me back, but it's been 25 years and old Randy still works at the Great American Cookie Factory, so I feel like I'm doing pretty good. At the end of the session, he says, I think you should come back. I was like, I don't really think I need to unless you want, I could do therapy on you? Then I thought about it and I was like, I do have some stories to work on, and he's a bit of a captive audience, so. Over the next couple of months, I told him about every story I could think of. No puppet stories. I wanted to ease him in before I weirded him out. Told him about who brought the kid and all the times I just felt, like the kid. And he always ended the session the same way. He'd grab his folder, write something down, and then say, time's up. I always wondered, what is he writing in that folder? I feel like sometimes he's like, Adam's fingers are abnormally large. One time he looked at me and he just goes, Adam, you're still trying to find validation from your father. And so you put that on people. And when that doesn't work out, you put it into projects. And when that doesn't work out, you get your heart broken. And I said, what do you think I should do about it? He goes, what do you think you should do about it? And I realized that's not an answer, but in the moment I was like, that is a good question. My dad always taught me growing up, he said, never take a problem to your boss without a solution. But if he was alive today, I'd be like, my therapist is making a killing not offering solutions. I asked my therapist, I said, can I tell you something? I really miss my dad. I miss his presence. I miss his smile. I miss his laugh. I miss the way that he'd hug me. I'm really small. He was really big. He just sort of would engulf me. I hate that he doesn't know my wife or my kid, or my brother's family. I hate that he's not growing old with my mom. And I'm mad at him. I'm mad because he didn't have to do COVID like the rest of us. He didn't even have to shelter in place. I mean, I guess he kind of did. And it was a much smaller place. Humor is our medicine. I said, I just miss his encouragement. My therapist said, did you ever think that the way that your dad talked about you is just the way that he wanted you to see yourself? Actually, my therapist didn't say that. That's what I came up with when he was just staring at me in silence. I feel like I'm doing all the work in this relationship. A couple years ago, I was watching The Tonight Show, and the comedian Mike Birbiglia was on. I've been listening to Mike Birbiglia for like 15 years. The first time I ever heard Mike was he shared a story on my favorite radio show, This American Life, which is hosted by Ira Glass. And Mike was on the Tonight Show promoting his one-man show on Broadway. And he said, I'm holding a contest called Birbig's Understudy. The idea was like, it's his one-man show. He can't have an understudy, but what if he could? And so he said, make a video of yourself doing one of my old bits, post it online. I'm gonna pick my favorite one. You're gonna come and open for me on Broadway. And there was like just something inside that kind of felt like, Adam, you could do this. So I entered. That night I was at a party and a friend of mine came up and she said, what is this contest that you entered? And I told her the concept and then I showed her the video and she looked at me and goes, that's a weird idea for a contest. And then she just walked away. It's like, it wasn't a criticism, but it was not a compliment. It's like if somebody comes up to you and is like, you got a haircut, but then that's it. That's a weird idea for a contest. That's what she said. But what I heard was, who brought the kid? The day they were supposed to announce the winner of the contest, Mike gets on Instagram and he says, we've had such an overwhelming response to the contest, we're extending the deadline by a week. That's what he said. But what I heard, you already know. So the new deadline came and it went, and that was that. People had asked me, like, did you ever hear from the contest? And I would say no, but it was fun to enter, which was kind of a lie because I was embarrassed. I thought I could do it. A couple days later, I'm at work, my phone vibrates. It's an Instagram notification. It says, @Mike Birbiglia is now following you on Instagram. And I said to my friend, that's weird. Mike Birbiglia is following me on Instagram. He probably just follows everybody who entered the contest. But then I get another notification. This time it's a direct message from him. And he says, hey, Adam, guess what? ? And then those 3 little dots popped up for what felt like a freaking eternity. Until finally, he said, you won. I lost my mind. I started running and jumping and screaming. We were on the 3rd floor at work. Everybody from the 2nd floor came up and said, what's going on up here? Is somebody hurt? My friends were like, Adam's gonna perform on Broadway. And they're like, that's different than what we thought. 5 days later, my wife and I were standing in the Court Theater just off of Times Square. The Court Theater has since been renamed the James Earl Jones Theater. So I wasn't in Star Wars, but I got pretty close. We're talking to the producers about how the night's gonna go, and the door behind me opens up, and in walks Ira Glass. Ira Glass is my favorite storyteller of all time. It'd be like, sir, what do you do for a living? You're a natural gas trader. So it would be like you met your favorite gas guy. You get it. We go into the auditorium, and I'm backstage, and Ira's on stage going through the way he's going to introduce me. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope I get a little bit of time with Mike and Ira, because like typically when you win a contest to meet a celebrity, is like not a lot of FaceTime. Like one time when I was a kid, I got invited to this thing called An Evening with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which by the way is a terrible name for a kid's event. It was an event to promote like exercise and eating healthy, you know, something 10-year-olds are very passionate about. And like for hours, these trainers are just like leading us in these exercises. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger runs in for like 10 minutes and does a couple of push-ups. And then he's like, I'll be back. And then he wasn't. So I'm thinking to myself, if I get any time with Mike or Ira, I'm just gonna ask them one question. Why did you pick me? And right then, Ira Glass turns around and he looks at me and he goes, Adam, this is the part of the show where I'm going to say why we picked you. And I thought to myself, holy crap, I think Ira Glass can read my mind. He said, the reason we picked you is because when we saw your video, we thought, oh, this guy could actually do this. And I thought to myself, I wonder if Ira Glass knows I just pooped my pants. My biggest fear of the night was that the crowd was not going to be on my side. Like they've come from all over the place. They come to a Broadway show to hear their favorite comedian. But first, here's a kid from Tulsa, Oklahoma, whose only experience doing stand-up up to this point is one time he did a sketch at a kids camp with a puppet. Just before I'm about to go on stage, Mike Birbiglia walks up to me and he goes, hey, Adam, just so you know, you can't mess this up because whatever you do, that's the show and it's gonna be great. And he was right. I've thought about that night a lot, specifically because of the encouragement that came to me from strangers, Mike and Ira. And I think it's helped me to realize this thing that I believe. Familiarity keeps us from seeing the gifts in each other, to the point that we are discouraging to the people we love the most. It happens to us. We do it to other people. Sometimes unintentionally, we become the villain in somebody else's story, kind of like I was in Bria's story. But I think what I'm most grateful for is my dad wasn't like that. My dad just chose to stay in awe of the good that was in me. And that's how I want to be. I want to be the person who encourages the people that I love. I want to be the one who draws out the gifts in my family and my friends. I mean, I want to be like my dad. And I think he would have loved Mike's words that night. Whatever you do, that's the show, and it's gonna be great. My dad obviously wasn't there that night, though that would be quite the plot twist. But I know he would have been so proud of me. He would have hopped on a plane, sat on the front row, watched my set, and left before Mike even took the stage. And he would have said, I saw what I came to see. And then as we're leaving the theater that night, his arm around my neck and him holding my mom's hand, with the biggest smile on his face, he would have looked over at me and said, you want to go to Wendy's? I love you guys. Thank you very much.